Thank you for joining us and welcome to the most recent event for the Language for the Professions series hosted by the Department of Foreign Languages and Literature. This event serves to highlight certain career pathways that benefit from language study, and it will be held every semester. Today here with us, we have Quentin, who will be talking about subtitling, translation for subtitling and voiceover in film and television. This is going to be a webinar style event, so please post any questions or comments you have in the chat box. And at the end, you can post any Q&A discussion questions in the Q&A box. And Jose will be reading those and moderating with our speaker, Quentin, who is a good friend of mine. Thank you for joining us, Quentin, and I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, so my name is Quentin Rambaud. I'm French. I'm joining you today from Italy because I share my life between France and Italy at the moment. So I was born back in 79 in France. I work mostly in Paris, but as a freelance translator, I can work almost from anywhere in the world, which is the big freedom that gives me. And I am a translator specialized in subtitling, not dubbing, subtitling and some voiceover for film and television. So in France, you have to know that we tend to call my job auteur de sous-titres, which means literally author of subtitles. All this to say that we have a specific status that is quite close to that of a writer, which means we have no unemployment insurance, no vacation pay, but we get paid also in royalties, which means when our work is used, every time it's broadcast or used in movie theaters, we get royalties. Most importantly, what that means, the financial aspect aside, is that as the author of a specific translation, you have intellectual rights over it, and it can't be used without your authorization, and of course without paying these royalties. The other aspect is that a translation you do for film or television in France must be signed. That means legally the subtitle's name has to appear somewhere in the end credits. That's a legal obligation. I try and move quickly to my my background. I was employed in the past by a French subtitling and dubbing studio. That was a job I had I got at the end of my studies. I worked part-time for a little more than 4 years there in Paris. It was a Paris-based company. And I became freelance back in 2006. So that's quite a long time ago already. I moved back to the studies because I think that's an aspect that's interesting to everyone today. So I was the son of 2 English teachers. I think it's important to mention that because that's clearly part of my background. English was a part of my life from an early age, I should say. And I frequently traveled to English-speaking countries and mostly the UK. So back to the studies. I think I knew very soon that I wouldn't go into maths or physics, but languages and literature. That was quite clear. But even studying languages and literature, I've always been more interested in the formal linguistic aspect of things rather than in the psychological side. That is, I've always been fascinated by the way language can describe or even mimic reality, and also the way language can shape our view of the world. And if we think about that in the professional side, so subtitling, there's also the way how a poor translation can ruin a work of art or just a movie. So after high school, I did 2 years of preparatory school for university. I studied foreign language and literature in English. Then I spent a year in the UK as a French assistant teacher. I completed my master's degree in France, writing an essay on the French translation of a British contemporary novel. Then I did a postgraduate diploma in dubbing and subtitling. That was very specific, just a 1-year diploma. And after that, I found an internship in a subtitling company in Paris, and got my first job in that company a few months later. So I think I've gone around the background and university aspects of things. So I try and move to the basic method of how I work and what I do. You'll probably have questions later on about that. I don't know if anyone has questions right now, but the first and most important thing to know about subtitling is the spotting. So I don't know if anyone knows what the spotting is. I'll try and explain it briefly. It's basically it's almost a type of editing. It's selecting the beginning and end of every subtitle. So it has to be extremely precise. That's why we use a video that's time-coded. So it's a frame-by-frame process, and any subtitle has to start precisely on the right frame, just when the character starts his sentence, and then has to end before the frame change in the picture. So the spotting is quite it's a long process. It can take up a day or two for a movie, and it can be done for me, or I can do it myself. Generally, for the movies that are going to be released in theaters, it's provided to me by a French subtitling lab, and it's done exclusively and specifically for the French subtitles. That means we don't use an international template, an international spotting that we can't edit. It is done specifically for one market. And I'm free to alter it, of course, if I need to. Whereas, of course, platforms like Netflix tend to use the international system, where you just receive a spotting list and you have to fill in the gaps in a way. So I'll show you a quick video clip of a movie I subtitled. So it's a short excerpt from the movie Yesterday, and I'm going to try and share the video right now, just to show you the basic spotting. There we go.
Un petit mot à distance de Quentin, notre lauréat. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking.
Oh, sorry, love, I'll get it.
Good start, though. Very pretty.
It's Terry!
Terry!
Terry,
Hey!
Jack's just playing us a new song.
Oh, what's this one called?
Leave It Be.
Let it be.
Oh, excellent. Well, rock on, Jack.
When I find myself in times of trouble.
Would you like a drink, Terry?
Dad.
Well, I'd already heard that bit.
Yeah, I'll get beer, please, Jed.
Excellent. Carry on, Jacko. I'll be back.
Hurry it up, darling, you're losing the crowd.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes.
Hello, love. I'm just at Jed and Sheila's house listening to Jack's new song. Let him be.
Let it be.
Let it be. Listen, I'll call you back when it's over, all right? Right, carry on broadcasting, young man.
Maybe start after the first bit. I've heard it 3 times.
Christ, this is Let It Be! You're the first people on earth to hear this song!
Oh, that'll be Marge.
Oh,
She said
oh,
she was
is
going to
it?
come
Well,
round.
that's
So
all right.
oh, yeah.
Well, that went well. Oh, that's good coffee. Good.
Bonjour. Okay. Okay, and we're back. So, yes, that was to illustrate mostly the spotting and more than the translation itself. So, yeah, it's the spotting has to be very, very precise and very logical, so that sentences are cut in a way that makes sense, and that's also in a way that makes the translation easier for the translator. And you have to take the film editing into consideration, of course, and always bear in mind the importance of shot changes and rhythm, because even though subtitling is a written form of translation, it has to respect the rhythm of the original version as much as possible. Then there are differences between TV and cinema, technical differences mostly. For the movies, we are free to take up more characters per line than for TV. For the movies, it can be up to 40 or 42 characters, space included. For television, it's generally around 36. Then I'll show you a screenshot of one of the tools I use, the software I use for subtitling. So these tools, there's one professional software that we're free to choose and use for subtitling. Then we get a video of the film or series we're going to translate. Of course, we also receive the continuity, the dialogue list. We use dictionaries, and we use tons of online resources, of course. So I'll show you a screenshot of the software. Okay. There we go. So on this window, you see the main video window, the active subtitle here, and the list of subtitles there that you can scroll down. And I don't know if you can see at the bottom this tiny green bar. It basically tells you how much characters you've used and how much you can use in theory. So this one uses 51 for 53, so that's fine. And the basic formula is the human eye can read. I don't know if you still hear me. Okay. I go back to, there we go. Okay, so yeah, I was saying that the basic formula is basically the human eye can read around 15 characters per second. So a subtitle that has a duration of 2 seconds will be around 30 characters, not more. Right. So I'll try and move to the translating process itself now. When you have everything, when you have all the tools, when you have the spotting, you can, and of course you've seen the movie, you can start your translation. It's not a literal translation that's altered to fit the format. It is a specific one that's purposely created for subtitles only, and it's going to be very different from the dubbing one. Obviously, the dubbing will be generally much longer because it's something you hear, it's not something you read, and then it has to be in sync with the lip movements. So for subtitles, you have to aim at a translation that's concise, that's short, without being incomplete, and always try and render the sense of rhythm that's true to the original version. Again, there's the question of line breaks. You can't just have a line break anywhere in the sentence. It has to make sense. It has to be easily readable in a way. So you often can change or rethink your translation in order to have a clean line break. For instance, I'll show the slide again. So. If you have a comma, that's an easy, of course, that's an easy reminder of when to use a line break. If not, it has to be a lexical unit that makes sense. And you of course you won't have a word like de or of at the end of a sentence, but you have to have a lexical unit that makes sense and keep it whole. Back to the tools, I show you one more screenshot because there is, of course, when you work in the movie industry, there's always the security aspect of things. The videos that we use are encrypted. We use secure downloads and encryption tools. So some of them will look like this. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to show you a protected video. There we go. So you have watermarks, you have my name all over it, property of the studio, you have codes. So obviously you shouldn't use it for any other use than your professional use. Right. So so the notion of readability, yes. To sum things up before I move to the translation strategies that I use, I would say that you in this job you work with yes, you work with technical constraints and not really against them. So the result should be something that's almost natural, discreet, and in our professional field, we always say that the best subtitles are the one that you don't notice, basically. So how do we manage that? that's of course, that's a lot of experience. But there are strategies and approaches that I can try and explain. What we translate is dialogue. It's not a novel. It's not something that's meant to be read originally. It's meant to be heard. But we write it down in the form of subtitles. So we always have to ask ourselves the question, what would a French character say in a French-speaking movie or in a French-speaking series? Yeah, almost think as a screenwriter. So I generally write a first draft, although I don't really like the phrase first draft because it has to be more than that. I do most of the work during the first draft, even though I later watch the whole movie again over and over and over again. So the second time I do some changes. The third time I do probably fewer changes. The third time even fewer, and so on. So that the final time is just basically watching the movie, and you won't change many things. The other thing is that for film and sometimes for television, we work on a preliminary version of the film, and we have to do last-minute checks and last-minute changes on the final version, the final cut that we receive sometimes a couple of days before our translation is due. So that can be tricky. And then we proofread, and we then move to the final phase, that is what we call simulation, simulation in French. Basically, we are in a room with a technical operator, the client or the clients, and we watch the movie with the subtitles, and we have to argue, defend our translation, discuss. It's probably the most sometimes stressful, sometimes interesting, generally interesting, but it's also a bit of a diplomatic effort sometimes. So yeah, I was saying most of the work takes place during the first draft, which consists both of translation and research, because research is necessary in most of the time, because any movie uses a specific vocabulary, specific professional vocabulary, or slang, of course, but we'll move to slang a bit later on. So research can mean spending hours on the internet and mostly sorting the information that we find. And it's also talking to professionals. If it's a medical series, it's talking to doctors. Sometimes it's asking questions to an air traffic controller if there are planes or airports involved. It's happened to me in the past. Talking to sailors, to police officers, to criminals, it might be trickier. So then documentation can take different forms. For me, it often takes the form of watching French original series or films, like Engrenage, that's called Spiral, I think, in the US. It's a police series that's set in Paris, very realistic. And for me, it's a source of information for slang, for police slang, and also for the slang that used by drug dealers or any type of criminals. So that's very important. Even though we study a foreign language, I study in English, I also have to study the evolution of my own mother language. So the evolution of French by reading books, watching movies, series, and also talking to younger adults. For instance, when I worked on the series called Grownish, I had to adapt my vocabulary and talk to teenagers. Same thing for the movie Get Out by Jordan Peele. You have to play with language in a way. It's very funny, but it's also very challenging. So of course, in some movies you will hear the F word probably 150 times, and you won't be able to write down putain, which means fuck, 150 times. So you have to find other strategies. Sometimes we just omit the F word because there is no need to use it in the subtitle. But you can also shift the slang to another word in the sentence, and just make it work in the general tone. You don't have to translate literally any fuck you hear, of course. Research can take also the form of reading a book that a movie was inspired by. And for period movies or series, of course, the vocabulary you use has to match the period. And that can be tricky because if it's set in the 19th century, it's one thing. If it's set in the 1950s, it's another thing. And sometimes you take words for granted, but then when you go back and have a look at their origin, you can be surprised. So always be very, very prudent when using words in period movies, and it's better to check twice because yeah, you can be sorry. Then I say a few words about the creative aspect, because sometimes you have to use quite a lot of imagination, especially for jokes or for puns, play on words. And generally you have to alter them to make them work, because of course they're made of words that will not have the same effect in French or in any other language. So so you have to adapt them. For instance, I try and go slowly over this. I wrote down something that I worked on very recently. The original dialogue was "Dreadful man, by all accounts," to which the other lady replied, "Talking of accounts, would you be able to pay me to settle my account?" So dreadful man, by all accounts. If you translate it literally, there is no way the word account can come back in the second dialogue, talking of accounts. So you have to find something that works. Basically, it's about money. So try and think of a phrase that uses a reference to money, and that can work, to say dreadful man by all accounts. So I thought of pas aimable pour un sou, which literally means not nice for a penny. and that's a French phrase. So pas aimable pour un sou, and then talking of accounts became à propos de sous, speaking of pennies, and that works. That works just fine. I know it's not easy when you talk like this, but I was quite pleased to find this solution, because I was stuck for a moment on this dialogue. So there's puns, there's jokes, there's also cultural differences and cultural references that can be tricky to use in a foreign translation. So as a translator, you kind of have to be the judge of what's understandable enough by an average audience, of who's famous enough to be kept in the French translation. For instance, we often get references to baseball players in American series and films. Some of them are hardly known to anyone in France. So you have to find the right balance, and sometimes use some other figure, someone that's better known, but that still makes the dialogue work, and that's not always easy. Another thing is that you can have you sometimes have mistakes in the original version that you don't know what to do with. Do I have to correct them? Do I have to translate it just the way it's written, or kind of make things right? It's not easy to decide. It's generally not very nice or very helpful to say the opposite of what the character is saying in the original version that you hear, because that's one of the main differences between subtitling and dubbing. In subtitling, you always still hear the original version, so any mistakes you do, the audience will see, but if there is a mistake in the original version, it's tricky. So you have to find a way that makes the translation work, so the error is less obvious. It happened to me very recently. There was someone talking about the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, and the character actually gets things mistaken. So instead of repeating the words he uses, because he inverts two terms, I just said the first and the second without using the actual words, and it kind of worked. But that's something that you can that can also make the process a bit more difficult. I think I've said pretty much everything I wanted to say in this introduction, in this presentation. So I'm ready to answer any of your questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Quentin. Thank you very much for your presentation. We have, I believe at this point, we have one question in the chat.
Okay.
Which is from Arturo Miranda. So he's asking, how did you get your very first professional contract to do subtitling and voiceover in film? And how did you get a fair payment for your work? Or did you always have to get underpaid to obtain a contract?
Okay. Yes. So my very first professional contract, I'm not sure I can remember my very first one, but the good thing is that I started within a company. So I didn't go freelance right at the beginning, right after I got out of the university. I worked for 4 years as a mostly as a spotter and a simulator, as we say. So I got my first jobs from this company, and then for film, it's hard to. It's quite hard to get a new client, a new distributor, because for film, that's what we do. We work for the distributor. So if it's a Universal Pictures release, I'm going to be hired directly by Universal Pictures France. I work for them, and the first time I worked for them was. Probably, yeah. I think I had worked on a movie by Richard Curtis for another distributor. I heard about a new movie he was writing, and I wrote to the distributor I knew, and she told me who I should talk to at Universal, and it worked. But it's not often this simple. And then the second part of the question, for a fair payment, it's a very, very big issue, of course, because rates are rather going down than up, which is very sad but true. So I don't generally give my rate to the client. It's generally the other way around. They offer me a job at a specific rate, and I accept or decline. So basically, I think the best way, and that's what I do, the best way to keep rates at a reasonable level is just to decline the offers that you deem too low. And that's what I do very often, unfortunately, but you know, if we want to keep quality up, I think that's what we have to do.
Oh, yes, thank you. The next question is from Robert Gonzalez, and he's asking, what word would you recommend for a freelance subtitle?
Haha. I'm using a pretty dated software myself. I think one of the best ones in the market right now is called Easy Titles. I would think it's probably the best one available.
Easy Titles, yeah. Okay, thank you. The next question is from Juliette Parnell. How do you train as a subtitle translator? Any specific schools or universities in the US or in Europe?
I don't know about the US. I know about Europe and mostly France, because that's where I studied. In France, yes, there are very specific trainings in universities. There are probably 5 or 6 universities in France that offer a degree in subtitling and dubbing. The two things are generally linked, dubbing and subtitling. So it's, yeah, translation for TV and cinema.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a couple of questions from Cecilia Tokaimasa. So what has been the most difficult job to research for, and why? And what did you do? And also
Start there.
oh well, yeah, if you can answer, yeah, this first question, I will ask you the next one afterwards.
Okay. So the most difficult one, where the research was the most difficult. Not an easy one. There are so many. Yeah, well, No, probably medical stuff, I would say. I even worked on some of the early episodes, the early seasons of House MD. But we were lucky enough at the time to have a doctor in the team, actually. We had a doctor who actually proofread everything we wrote. And he offered his help, and we could ask all the questions we had. So that was really great. When it's, of course, scientific or medical stuff, I always try and speak to a doctor. Even if we don't have a doctor in team with us, I try and find a relative or someone that works in a hospital just to answer the most important questions. Yeah.
And then the second question, also from Cecilia, does your research for a job expire after a while? Meaning that do you need to renew your knowledge on a specific topic?
Yes. Not for all of them, but for many, yes, because language is alive. So, and of course, all the fields also evolve. So yes, it moves. It changes actually quite quickly. So that was I was mentioning talking to young adults, talking to teenagers, because the way language changes in a high school playground or even in school playgrounds is amazing. So yes, anything related specifically to teenagers will expire in a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is from Claudia Garcia. She's asking, she's saying that you mentioned that it can be difficult to defend your translation in front of your client.
Yes.
Here, what type of cultural conflicts and tensions can emerge in a situation of this sort, and what kind of pressure clients typically bring to you?
Okay. So there are two different configurations. If I am physically with the client in the same room, it's generally pretty easy because generally we know each other and we have good relations. But it still, I use the word defend on purpose because you've worked weeks for a movie. Generally, you have roughly a month to work on a movie. So yeah, you say you've spent 3 to 5 weeks with this movie almost every day. You feel like you have your baby in your hands and you hand it over to someone else. So sometimes you're very happy with subtitles and or with just one word, and the client wants to change it. Generally, I get my own way, or sometimes it's the other way around. You see things in a new light when you have 2 or 3 people in a room seeing the movie with your subtitles and suggesting a change. It's not always about defending what you've done. It's also an exchange. So it's generally pretty enlightening to hear the reactions to what you've done. So the other possibility is you have someone reading your subtitles in a Word document, and you're not in the same room, and they edit the Word document, and they send it via email, and you get it the next day. That's generally much more complicated because you're not discussing the thing live, you're not discussing with the video, and there, yeah, you have to answer in a written form, so it's a bit more. I don't know if they put pressure, but it's definitely trickier. If yes.
Yes. The next question is from Anne-Laure Martinez. And I think you kind of answered the question briefly. How long does it take to subtitle an hour-and-a-half movie? And also,
yes.
I would like to add, like, what is the range and what does it depend on?
Okay. Yes. We have very different working conditions for films that are going to be released in theaters and for films for TV. For TV, we can have it can be maybe 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, we can be given 1 or 2 weeks to subtitle the whole movie. It's still feasible, but for an hour-and-a-half movie, I would say the reasonable the reasonable time frame is about 3 to 4 weeks. Yeah, if of course it's very different if you have say a romantic comedy for TV. That's pretty simple, but still I don't think you can write even a first draft in less than a week.
Okay. The next questions come from Caitlin Cool, and she's asking, what is your favorite film or TV show that you have worked on?
My favorite, probably my favorite, my all-time favorite TV show that I worked on would be Breaking Bad. As for TV shows, movies, I'd name 3 if that's okay. I'd say the first one, the first big movie I worked on was The Boat That Rocked. I don't know if that rings a bell. That was about pirate radio off the UK in the 1960s by Richard Curtis, who also wrote For Weddings and a Funeral. Then there was Get Out by Jordan Peele. That was great to work on. Very, a very challenging experience. And the third one will probably be Yesterday, the one about the Beatles.
I'm going to follow up with a question to that. And what makes it fun? Is it, you kind of mentioned it was very challenging.
Yes.
You have more fun if it's more challenging, or is it a certain vocabulary that you enjoy working with more?
I think what I enjoy is precisely the challenge, because that's something I haven't mentioned, but it's probably the reason why I keep doing this job 20 years on, because it's fun. For me, it's a game. It might sound weird, but the translating books, translating newspaper articles is great, but you don't get the same kick in a way. When you translate a dialogue that you hear at the same time, and when you read your own subtitle and you get the impression that it's just the same thing, then it's a pretty it's a great feeling when you feel you've succeeded, although it's something written and it's in a different language, but you feel you've got it. Yeah. So the challenge is part of the fun, And also, as you mentioned, of course, some types of vocabulary can make it more fun. And that was probably the case with Get Out by Jordan Peele, because all this contrasting vocabulary between the rich white conservative family and Black Americans working at the TSA. Yeah, no, that's probably also the contrast and shifting from one style to another. That's what makes it very enjoyable. Yeah,
absolutely. So then I have a few questions from Corny Witt. I will divide it basically in two groups of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, or the first group, how big of a team is generally responsible for the production of the subtitles for, let's say, a blockbuster film? And what are the different job title and specialties involved?
Okay. Yes, so the team responsible for the production of the subtitles for a blockbuster, it's quite a large team. First of all, you have the local distributor. So at the local distributors, there is generally a head of technical affairs. That's generally the person who chooses the translator for the specific movie. So then there will be, between the distributor and myself, there will be a subtitling company in charge of most of the technical work. They will have someone in charge of the project. They will hire someone to do the spotting generally, and another person to do the simulation, the final checks with the client and the translator. So that can generally, it comes up to 4 people in the same room the day we do the final checks. And as a whole, up to 10 people can work on the production of the subtitles. Yeah, can be involved.
Okay, and then the second part of the same group of questions is, when you are in the assimilation process at the end, how does the producer, director, writer of the original production know how to evaluate the effectiveness of the subtitles? Do they have their own translator, interpreter to double check your work?
Right. So the original writer or director very rarely has a say. It's very rare. It happened probably with 1 or 2 directors, but it's very exceptional. However, it really is a matter of trust. The writer and director, they hand over their film to a distributor, and they have to be happy with what they're going to do with it. So I think the responsibility is the distributors, really, and that's why the person from the French side of the distributing company is so demanding generally with us. We have someone who doesn't take things lightly. They want to be perfectly happy with what we've done, and have several different people looking at the translation to make sure it is absolutely fitted to the movie. So even if the director or writer doesn't check the translation in person, I think there's kind of a chain of trust that makes things safe.
Yes, thank you. Then the next question is from Juliette Parnell. And she says, would it be fair to say that translating subtitles or dubbing is harder than translating a novel, for example, or not? And also, what specific skills would be needed to translate subtitles versus literature?
Okay. It's difficult to say that it's harder. It is different. It is definitely different, and you do need different skills. And probably the main skill you need to be able to write subtitles correctly is the spirit of synthesis, of being able to say everything in few words, but without missing out on anything. That's it sounds very simple, but it's probably the most difficult aspect of the thing. Being concise, being able to, go right down to the essence of the dialogue.
Thank you. That I think we have
One more
time
question. Yeah.
for one more. Okay, so we have one more question for Cornewith, and she's asking, when you see a movie that is in a language that you do not understand, do you prefer to watch the dubbed version or the subtitle version? I guess he's asking about your personal opinion.
Yes. I will answer very straightforwardly. I always prefer the subtitled version, even if it's in Korean or Japanese or any other language that I don't understand. Probably because even though dubbing is a great exercise, I have so much love and respect for the actors, that the original actors, that I can't separate them from their own voice. That's the thing.
Yes. You should see Tara and I going. Yes.
Yes.
We agree. We absolutely agree. Yes, it is almost 5 p.m. So I believe just Tara wants to say goodbye and say a couple of words. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
My pleasure. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you being with us here today, and everyone for attending. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.